Hi everyone, I am here with a true story. This one is by Carol M. and it is called New Memories. This one's a little longer, so bear with me. Our son Zach has always had a lot of friends because of his fun, loving, salesman-like personality. Fortunately, my husband Tim and I were always able to be his friends too. As we grew up, he seemed to grow more open with us, regularly opening up for heart-to-heart conversations. Zach even won a business trip to Colorado and amazingly chose me, his mother, to go with him. Later, he took his dad when he won a trip to Hawaii. Jeez. He must be smart or something, winning all these trips. My goodness. That's the way our family was. One day, not long after Zach was married, he came to me and asked about the way we had disciplined him when he and his sister were younger. Tim and I tried our best to love and train them well. We certainly didn't do everything perfectly, and we've humbly admitted to many errors. Yet we tried to love our children and apply parental discipline and discernment and love. As soon as Zach brought this up, I was confused. He'd never seemed so affected by those type of memories. He then told me that his wife had prompted him to see a counselor about his past, because according to her, he had abandonment issues and was unable to cope with life. He felt that she would threaten their marriage if he didn't go to a counselor. When she picked out a counselor, he felt compelled to go. That day, Zach asked me to go with him to his counseling session. The hesitation and incredible angst I was feeling about this had nothing to do with the counseling itself, but with the topic that seemed to have come up about the clear blue. The office was black and dark when we got there. When the counselor arrived and turned on the lights, she told me exactly where to sit, said I couldn't speak a word, ask a question, or seek clarification. I was just to listen. She then began telling me of Zach's internal struggles with the way we disciplined him as a child, and how those things had caused him great damage in his ability to cope. You have ruined him, she said to me, continuing on with further statements of how I was a bad influence. She told me that all the encouraging notes I wrote to Zach were unhealthy because they caused Zach to feel uncomfortable and uneasy. I don't agree with that. Yet Zach had thanked me many times for the notes of encouragement and praise. He had written me letters telling me that I was his example. He'd involved me in his life since young adulthood. This counselor was describing Zach as a person I didn't know. There was no truth in her words. I felt it was all blatant attack on me. I wasn't a perfect parent by any means, yet throughout my adult relationship with Zach, I sought to understand him. I cared about where he was coming from when we discussed past hurts. I'd birthed, raised, and loved him for 30 years. This situation was simply confusing. I felt angry, condemned, and betrayed. The counselor then told us that neither Tim nor I were to have any contact with Zach or his family. No communication. Who is she to say that his mother cannot and his father cannot contact him? No letters, no notes of affirmation. No seeing our 1-year-old granddaughter. I walked out of the office, certain this was the darkest experience I'd ever had. Driving home, I cried my heart out. I was devastated, angry, and confused. I can't believe he would let that counselor attack his mother that way. I felt as if my heart had a sword through it, and it had been twisted until I could no longer stand the pain. Tim and I immediately went straight to a Christian counselor and friend named Alan. After hearing our story, Alan wisely said, "This is a spiritual battle. Go home, get a prayer team, and start praying." We called and emailed a number of friends who graciously agreed to partner with us in prayer for the power of Satan to be broken and for our relationship with Zach to be restored. Meanwhile, we tried to reconcile with Zach and see if we could talk things through. 2 times we reached out, only to be unpleasantly reminded we were to have no communication with him. For 6 months, I cried daily. The pain and loss were deep. I began spending long periods every day reading the Word to get my feet on level ground. As Jesus' presence became my sustenance and his word my perspective, he reminded me of a time earlier in life when a counselor had said, "The person who has hurt you will come out of it. When they do, have a ready heart to receive them. Otherwise, you'll want to say, 'You owe me because you hurt me.' Let the Holy Spirit keep your heart clean." So I started working on daily forgiving Zach, his wife, and the counselor. But it still didn't explain the darkness of the situation. After about a year, and through a divine appointment, the Lord led me to a friend who instantly identified the type of psychological counseling Zach had received and which had ensnared him: false memory syndrome. Fake memory syndrome is a condition in which a person's identity and relationships are affected by memories that are factually wrong but strongly believed. In our case, the counselor led Zach to believe our discipline damaged him for life, and that the only way for him to survive and overcome those memories was for us to be removed. My prayers for Zach now had a target. I prayed for God to heal and restore his right and true memories back to him. 2.5 years. And just think, not only are they not getting to see their son, but their granddaughter, who was only 1 year old, they are not getting to see for 2 years straight. She's not even going to remember them. 2.5 years, almost 3 years. After the awful meeting with Zach's counselor, Tim and I took our annual day trip north to hike and see the beautiful fall trees. At the time, Zach was living in the area, so I said to Tim, "I know we're forbidden to go by Zach's house or to see anyone in their family, but I have to go by and just see his house and where they live." "I had the same thought," said Tim, so we nervously turned off the main road and proceeded slowly down their street. Lo and behold, on the opposite side of the street, a nanny was pushing a stroller with our 2 granddaughters inside. Now they have another granddaughter they never even got to meet at all. "Tim," I said, "turn around and drive slowly past them. I need to see my granddaughters." I promised to duck down and be quiet. We turned around and started back slowly. Just after we drove past the nanny and the 2 girls, Zach came around the corner on his bike. "We're busted," said Tim. Both of us knew we weren't supposed to be there. We could only wonder what Zach might say or do to us. Zach rode right up to the driver's side of the car. We were both scared out of our minds. Tim rolled the window down just a crack, only enough to talk to Zach. To our amazement, Zach started talking about his new bike, the suspension, and his bike ride. "Don't you want to come back to the house and come in?" he asked. We were stunned. Without hesitation, Tim turned the car around. "Lord, help. We need you more now than ever." We both cried aloud in prayer. We cautiously pulled onto the driveway, got out of the car, and walked into the garage with Zach. His wife and our two granddaughters, Sky and Kaylee, were standing there. Before we knew it, Zach turned to his 3-year-old Sky and said, "Wouldn't you like Grams, my grandmother name, to read you a story?" I followed Sky to her bedroom, sat down on her bed, still in shock and fighting back tears, and read her a story. While I was reading the story, Zach appeared. "Sky, don't you want Grams to read you another story?" Several stories later, I decided to leave because I was uncomfortable, nervous, and unsure of what might happen next. Tim had gone to the car for the same reasons. We were aware that Zach had told us twice that we were to never come at their house. Did the rules of this game just changed, I wondered? But Zach stopped me as I was trying to leave, saying he wanted to show me something they had done on their new home. While I was going with him, he looked at me with his smile. All of you mothers know what I mean. I knew it would be okay when I saw that Zach smile. When we finally left, Tim and I were in shock. We cried and rejoiced as we drove out to see the Leafs. We knew that only through our prayers and the prayers of our faithful friends could Zach be set free from Satan and the hands of his counselor. Zach invited us back into his life as if nothing negative had ever happened, and the Lord answered my prayers. I didn't feel a need to say you were wrong or to hold him accountable for my pain. I could have rejected his acceptance, but instead my heart was able to receive it. By the grace of God, I was able to move on with a clean heart. Tim and I never imagined the way the Lord would reconcile us with our son. Zach has encouraged us to visit his family anytime we can. During our visits, Tim, Zach, and I have had heart-to-hearts, just as before. We have our son back, and I can only credit the Lord for this complete restoration. The Lord brings healing and renewals. His power is at work in each of us. He is sovereign in our most painful situations, proving his ways wonderful, complete, and beyond anything we could ever ask or imagine. He truly cares for us and graciously hears and answers our prayers. There is hope for your descendants, declares the Lord. Your children will return to their own land. Jeremiah 31:17. Good night, guys.